The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, October 19th. Again, sorry for the odd hour. Let the music finish. Sorry for the odd hour. I know it's 3:30 East Coast time, but it is 11:30 Tbilisi time. I just landed in Tbilisi an hour and a half ago, so I'm doing this and then going to sleep. I'm doing 3 talks tomorrow in Tbilisi and 2 talks on Saturday in Tbilisi, including one on Israel at the local Jewish Israel House, it's called. So it's that'll be interesting. So that'll be a talk on Israel. But I'm doing talks tomorrow on morality of capitalism, on the virtue of selfishness, and on pursuing happiness. And on Saturday, I'm doing a talk on Israel, and then also another talk on the morality of capitalism. So they're keeping me busy in Georgia, as they always do. Lots going on, and that's good. Yesterday we did a show, so I don't know why Maximus says I haven't been doing shows, but yesterday we did a show, so it's up and available on YouTube. Let me just say, for those of you interested in attending my events, those of you who might be listening in Europe, although it's already late in Europe, but let's see, we've got Monday evening, we've got an event or afternoon in Golda in Netherlands, in Golda in Netherlands. On Tuesday, we've got an event in Copenhagen at Sipos. You can find information about all these events on the Ayn Rand Institute events website. You can also find, I think information about the events on yaronbrookshow.com. Under the events tab, you can find information. Then we've got an event in Montenegro, at a university in Montenegro. That will be on Wednesday. On Thursday, I will be in Maastricht. Maastricht is in the Netherlands, but it's also pretty close to Germany. So if you're in Western Germany, the Cologne area, then please come out. We'd love to have you at the Maastricht event. That is on Thursday. On Friday, I'm still waiting for details, but I'm doing a debate in London on should the NHS be privatized with a former advisor to UK Prime Minister. So that should be fun. Hopefully you can come to that. So that'll be in London on next Friday. And then Saturday, I'll be in Lisbon at a Students for Liberty big event, Students for Liberty event in Lisbon. So full schedule events. Again, if you want information about any particular event, you can find it either on my website or on the Ayn Rand Institute. Some of the events might not be listed. That might be because they're private, or it might be because we don't yet have information. For example, the NHS debate, we still don't have final information about venue and whether it's open to the public and how many people will be able to come and all things like that. I think actually the venue they have right now, it's just cannot accommodate a lot of people, which is not good. So they're working on a bigger venue. So we'll see actually what happens as we work through that. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Yeah, I want to remind you that the Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor. You should go to aynrand.org/start here. You can find a lot of information about all the stuff that the Ayn Rand Institute has done, has commented on with regard to the current war in Israel. In particular, I would highlight that they put out 2 videos on the status of innocence and the responsibility for the death of innocents in war. One is a video of Ayn Rand's comments on this in Q&A when she, I think at Photo Forum, she commented this during Q&A, so there's audio of her commenting on this. And second is a discussion between Ilan Journo and Onkar Gate about this topic. Highly recommend. It's a difficult issue. I mean, I don't think it's that difficult, but it can be a difficult issue. It's certainly an emotional issue. And so go to einrand.org/start here for info on that. All right, let's see what else. What else do we have? That's it. I'll just remind you, if you want to support the show on a monthly basis, if you like my coverage, if you like the things I have to say and about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if you like my history lessons that I've put out about Hamas and about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if you like the fact that I'm traveling around the world talking about ideas to audiences all over the world, then please support the Yaron Book Show on a monthly basis. You can do it on Patreon. Patreon's a great, easy platform to do it on, or you can do it on PayPal through yaronbookshow.com/support. All right, let's see. Where do we want to go from here? So most of the show today will be, it dominates the news. It's hard to avoid. Will be focused again on the situation in Israel and on the situation in the U.S. and really in the Middle East. So a few stories of interest coming out of the Middle East, I think, today. One is, it's turned out that over the last few days, but in particular yesterday, significant attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. There was a major drone and missile attack on a U.S. base in western Iraq. Yesterday, I think an Islamist group has taken responsibility. Some Islamic resistance of Iraq or something like that has taken responsibility. But let's be very, very clear, although the Americans would never admit it, will not admit this. No attack like that is going to happen without the express support and thumbs up of the Iranian regime. So the Iranians are probing, they're poking the Americans, and they're using the opportunity to attack the Americans in Iraq and Syria. Now, why are the Americans in Iraq and Syria? Good question. I guess they're still fighting ISIS over there. So much for Trump having defeated ISIS and finished with it, but it's still so much for also bringing all the troops home. But there's still Americans in Syria. There's still Americans in Iraq. Their safety, I think, should be of paramount importance to the American regime, to the American government. And, if the Iranians are responsible for this, they should be penalized, and Americans should penalize them for doing this. Right now is probably not the right time to bring them home. There's work to do in the Middle East right now, or at the very least intelligence work, obstructing the ability of the Iranians maybe to send troops into Syria through those routes in western Iraq. But anyway, those troops are under attack. The exact casualty, the number of casualties, the extent of the damage, we don't know. It was significant drone and significant missile attacks on the Air Force Base yesterday that caused significant damage, much more than was first reported. So that's one story coming out of the Middle East. The other story that is really interesting is that overnight, the Houthis are Shiites in Yemen. They've been fighting a civil war in Yemen, trying to take over Yemen. The Houthis are basically funded and sponsored and report to the Iranians. They're an extension of Iran in Yemen. They've been fighting the Saudis for a long time. There's now a ceasefire, partially part of this negotiation that China was involved in getting some accommodation there. Anyway, last night, it turns out that these Houthis fired long-range missiles in the direction of Israel. So they fired long-range missiles out of Yemen, which is far away. If you look at a map of the Middle East, you should have a map of the Middle East handy these days. A lot is happening over there. And they launched missiles out of Yemen in the Israeli direction. Now, as far as we could tell, as far as we knew, the Houthis did not have missiles that could reach Israel until so whether these missiles would actually reach Israel, whether they would drop in the desert in southern Israel, what exactly the impact they could have is unknown. But this is another indication that the Iranians want to destabilize the entire region. They are dreaming, they are salivating at the prospects of bringing together an entire coalition of forces to attack Israel from every front possible. The missiles that were launched, there were 3 of these large, long-range missiles. The 3 missiles, interestingly enough, were shot down by a U.S. destroyer that was in the, I guess what would you call that area? I don't think it's quite in the Persian Gulf. It's probably in the Indian Ocean over there, between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. This is a destroyer deployed to the region, again, to prevent escalation. Well, it prevented escalation yesterday by destroying these missiles heading to Israel. They shot them out of the sky, so good for the U.S. Navy. Thank you to the U.S. Navy, and it's great to see the U.S. Deploying anti-missile technology in the Middle East, and that they have the latest and greatest anti-missile technology. The whole world is going to watch to see how the U.S. behaves here. I think that is suggestive of the role the U.S. fleet off of the coast of Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean is going to play. I think their role is primarily to knock out of the sky any missiles that Hezbollah or that Iran might try to send in the Israeli direction, or for that matter, towards American military bases, although the military bases are a little far from the sea, so it's going to be much more difficult. But I think the message has been sent to Hezbollah in the north. If you launch against Israel, the U.S. might not be on the offense against you. They'll leave that to the Israelis. But they will help the Israelis on defense. That is, they will help Israelis knock out particularly the most sophisticated missiles that the Hezbollah has. Long-range missiles, more powerful missiles, bigger missiles, that these ships off of the coast, I think, have the capabilities and fast enough, and they can knock them out of the sky fast enough. They can't knock out of the sky the small projectiles that are flying, just a few minutes in the air, but the ones that are longer and longer range and might hit Tel Aviv and things like that, they can go after. So. Yes, I mean, this is, I believe, the role the U.S. military is going to play. It's not going to put troops on the ground, but it is going to help Israel play defense. And thank you to the U.S. Navy for doing that. I think it's certainly in the U.S. interests. What the U.S. interests really require is to take out Iran, but I don't think that's going to happen. All right. Let's see what else. So I just want to bring you up to speed about the attack on the U.S. bases, the missiles from the Houthis. Again, I think both indicate, as if we needed more indication, direct Iranian involvement in what is going on through the region, and an Iranian at least prodding. I don't know that they're quite ready to launch yet, but at least prodding to see where the pain points are, prodding to see if America will intervene, prodding to see how committed Israel is. And I think we'll continue to see that. We'll continue to see the Iranians try to stir things up without fully committing as to not to piss off the Americans so much that they get directly attacked. So that's going on. A lot more of that is to come. A lot more of that is going to happen. Hezbollah is still periodically launching things. There's some news coming out that the Lebanese army is actually going down to the south and dismantling some Hezbollah. That would be really interesting if the Lebanese army actually takes an anti-Hezbollah stand. That could launch a civil war in Lebanon, but it would be amazing if that happened. It's about time. Lebanon needs to reassert its sovereignty over its land. Right now, Lebanon has 2 military forces, 2 basic governments in place. One is the Lebanese government that's elected, through a democratic process. The other is Hezbollah, which basically runs a militia, runs a terrorist organization, runs a military, an army that dominates much of Lebanon. And the question is at what point is the Lebanese military ready to challenge Hezbollah? I doubt that now's the time. They might want to wait for Israel to destroy Hezbollah first, but they seem to be involved. So again, interesting tidbits. Hard to tell exactly, again, fog of war, hard to tell exactly what's going on. As we well know, Biden was in Israel. He got his photo ops. He got to hug Bibi more than once, pretend that they were best friends. Biden enormously critical of Bibi Netanyahu, not a very warm relationship at all. But in this case, Biden has come through and is the great friend of Israel and so on. And everything he expressed in his visit was supportive of Israel, although if you actually dig a little deeper and you listen to Secretary of Defense, and they're very careful and they're very cautious and they're very circumspect. I mean, so it's clear that they're leaving themselves space to turn against Israel if the casualty list, the civilian casualty list in Gaza, climbs too high. They're leaving themselves space to be able to condemn Israel if Israel does things they don't like. They're leaving themselves space to appease the Arab countries, which they're very concerned about. They seem to be very, very worried about the views of the Arab countries, and they're leaving themselves, I think, space to deal with that. Yes, Jennifer, absolutely, they are cowards. They are cowards. They won't stand firmly behind Israeli victory. They're saying the right things, and I have to say that people in Israel, when you talk to people in Israel, are super thankful and truly believe that Biden is on Israel's side, and have nothing but positive things to say. I think they're missing out. I think the real, in the background, what's really happening is the United States is tying Israel's hands. The United States is restricting its ability to react. The United States is making demands on Israel that it's delaying the land incursion, the ground incursion into Gaza, and going to make it very, very, very difficult for Netanyahu and the rest of the Israeli administration to fulfill their promises to their voters about eradicating Hamas and eliminating it once and for all. I think that's going to be very, very difficult if your primary concern is civilian casualties. So it's going to be interesting to see the next few days, and interesting to observe both the Israeli administration, what they do. So far, very little. Indeed, I just was reading just before the show started, that, and I know this because I talked to my family today, that they're releasing some of the reserves to go home. They're telling them to be ready to be called up immediately again, but they're releasing some of the 360,000 reserve troops that they have. Now, that might be releasing them for a few days and then calling them back for the ground invasion. It might be that they're scaling back their activities. It might be that the U.S. has cut a deal with Iran about Hezbollah. It might be that there are other things going on where Israel is less concerned or is less committed to what is going on or what is going to happen. U.S. says something about international laws. There's no such thing as international law. International law is a bogus concept. Law that cannot be enforced, law that does not have an enforcement mechanism, is not law. It's the same reason there's no such thing as law and anarchism. There's no mechanism for enforcement. There's no agency of enforcement, and therefore there's no such thing as international law. There might be treaties, there might be understandings, there might be commitments, there might be things like that. But there's no such thing as international law, and this is a bogus kind of bogus term that the Europeans like a lot. Luckily, the United States and Israel have not signed up to much of the kind of International Criminal Court, for example's so-called mandate. But no, I don't believe in international law. I don't believe in the Geneva Convention. I believe in only one thing, and that is that the good guys have to win, and they have to do everything necessary to win. And that is the only standard by which they should be measured and evaluated, is, are they doing what is necessary to beat the bad guys? Are they doing what is necessary to defend the individual rights of their own people? That is the only standard in war. There is no other standard. There is no standard of the Hague or Geneva or Joe Schmo. It does not matter somebody else's decision about what's appropriate in war, what's not. It's not Augustine, it's not Thomas Aquinas, it's not Michael Walzer of West Point. The only standard is victory. A victory while minimizing casualties to one's own people. Victory while defending and protecting the individual rights of one's own people. Victory over evil. And yes, the rules are different for bad guys and good guys. Bad guys, people who initiate force, are not allowed to initiate any force. Initiation of force is always bad, always evil. In self-defense, you do whatever is necessary to defend yourself. All right, let's see. So Hamas killing civilians is not the same as Israel killing civilians. One is an act of horror and murder and massacre and evil, initiation of force, and the other is an act of self-defense. All right, let's see. Sorry. Yeah, so Biden, did what he needed to do. I think it's he's going to lose some votes on the extreme left, but I think he just gained independence. I think he comes across, and this is not me. This is just from the perspective of I think American, I think polls, and I think just presidential politics. I think he comes off as a statesman. People view this as an act of strength. They view it as an act of support for an ally. I think he only benefits from this. I don't see any downside. I mean, I see through it, but I doubt very many people out there see through it, and particularly people who might be on the fence about voting for Biden. I don't think they see through it. So I think this is a net win for Biden. I see no downside for him coming out of his visit. He comes across as, wow, going into a war zone. That's courageous, if you will. Notice that today, the Prime Minister of England, also somebody who's going to have a really difficult election next year, and who is probably going to lose significantly, is also running over to Israel to show how much of a statement, how much of a supporter he is, how good of an ally he is. We'll see how quickly he turns when things get tight and hot. But yes, Sunak is in Israel as well. So Israel is now the place that if you want to appear tough to your electorate, if you want to try to win an election next year, Israel is the place you go to visit. All right, I assume we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you all heard about the hospital, the destruction of the hospital in Gaza, where 500 people supposedly were killed. This was the message that the New York Times sent yesterday to its subscribers on, I guess this is a text message that you can subscribe to when you get breaking news from the New York Times. It said, breaking news, Israeli strike on a hospital kills hundreds, Palestinian officials say. Just like that, right? Israeli strike on hospital kills 100. Indeed, if you looked at headlines yesterday, they were dominated by this. CNN, pretty much all of the mainstream media ran stories about Israeli strike Israeli strike hospital and kill hundreds. I think the number that was bandied around was 500. Now it turns out that just a few hours later, one can say that every single word in that clause has been disputed. There have been several outlets, including the Israeli Defense Forces, but also U.S. intelligence, but also other sources that have looked at this and are saying it's not Israel. It wasn't an Israeli, so it wasn't an Israeli strike. The explosion at this hospital that killed hundreds, you can imagine a whole hospital just coming down, like we've seen some buildings in Gaza just going flip. You can imagine the same thing with the hospital. Turns out that it looks like whatever explosion happened, it happened in a parking lot adjacent to the hospital. It wasn't the hospital itself, it was in the parking lot. And 500, hundreds of people killed. There's no forensic evidence of that, and it seems very inconsistent. People died, for sure. Seems very inconsistent with the idea of hundreds. Indeed, significant evidence has now come to light, both video evidence and audio evidence of discussions among the Islamic Jihad that this was a projectile that Islamic Jihad had fired towards Israel that had a malfunction and it dropped onto the parking lot at the hospital and blew up. And the consequence of that was this headline: Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians officials say. Now, good for them for saying Palestinian officials say, right? I mean, the reality is that most readers did not read the Palestinian officials say. Most readers read, and most people responded to, and most other media, including the Times, basically took this as Israel strike kills hundreds in hospital, or Israel bombs a hospital and killed hundreds of people. That's what everybody basically took that to mean. Now, this is kind of stunning from a mainstream media that's been complaining about misinformation on Twitter and on social media. This was one big hell of a piece of misinformation. Now, you have to acknowledge that in the fog of war, in the midst of war, it's very difficult to tell what is true and what is not. But that's why maybe you wait a little bit before you break breaking news. It's why you maybe put the emphasis on Palestinian officials' claim rather than on Israel strike kills. It's how you emphasize because you're not exactly sure. But it is super, they've been caught, right? And does this reflect a bias? Of course it reflects a bias. It reflects a bias plus the whole issue of fog of war and the whole uncertainty about it. Even in the morning after, when there's already doubts raised about this, the headline on the New York Times was still hundreds killed in Gaza blast, Palestinians say. But whoever gets even to Palestinians say, hundreds killed in Gaza blast. Of course, hospital is gone now. That's good, right? Now, by this point, when this headline was published, hundreds killed in Gaza blast, in New York Times, by this point, other news outlets are already changing their framing of the story. So, for example, the Wall Street Journal, at about the same time as that headline hits New York Times, says, Biden backs Israel over Gaza hospital blast. President Biden arrived in Israel to affirm U.S. support, and appeared to absolve Israel of responsibility for a deadly blast at a hospital compound in Gaza. It's now a hospital compound, it's not the hospital, and Biden has absolved Israel from responsibility. So there's already some hedging by other news organizations, not by the New York Times, not by the New York Times. Later in the day, in the business section of the Times, they have a headline that says, after hospital blast, headlines shift with changing claims. Right? They don't admit to errors. They don't admit to a mistake. They don't admit to, whoops, we screwed up, sorry. And it's not a big headline on the front page, whoops, we screwed up, sorry. No. This is what they write. The news changed quickly over a couple of hours. Many Western news organizations, including the New York Times, reported the Gazan claim in prominent headlines and articles. They adjusted the coverage after Israeli military issued a statement urging caution about the Gazan allegation. The news organizations then reported Israeli military's assertion that the blast was the result of a failed rocket launch by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, an armored group affiliated with Hamas. Again, I mean, where's the admission of any problem, right? Nothing. And this is in the business section, buried somewhere. BBC and Al Jazeera also refused to respond to a request for comment about the fake headline or the wrong headline. And the New York Times spokesman reported that we report what we know as we learn it. Really? As they know? But they don't know. So this is just one example in a gazillion examples on a daily basis of where the news media just gets stuff wrong and gets stuff not just wrong, but wrong in a particular direction, wrong in a way that is clearly distortive. And again, these are the news agencies that are decrying the misinformation that is going on all over the rest of the country. It looks like, just breaking news right now, there is a very large rocket attack centered on the city of Tel Aviv, but really the whole south of Israel, from Rishon LeZion all the way up through northern Tel Aviv, and a little bit further to the east in Holon. It seems that whole area is under attack right now. The missiles from Gaza. Again, the missiles from Gaza don't stop, which is just 13 days after the massacre. 13 days have passed since Gaza declared war or launched a war against Israel. Well, it's been a war in Israel for 20 years, but in this round, and Israel's done almost nothing. Almost nothing. Okay, let's see. Also to remind you that I guess at 8 p.m. East Coast time, President Biden is going to address the nation from the Oval Office. He's going to talk finally about Ukraine, supposedly. He hasn't talked about Ukraine since the beginning of the Ukraine war, not in a direct address to the American people, explain why the U.S. is supporting Ukraine. And he's certainly going to talk about Israel, and he's going to tie the two together, and I think ask Congress for significant support for both countries. All right. So the hospital story, I think now it's fairly clear that the bombing was a result of an Islamic Jihad projectile. This suggests to all of you, all the listeners, and your friends and your family and everybody else, and what you share on Twitter and everything, just breathe before you start sharing stuff. Breathe before you believe the headlines, and this goes in all directions. It's very difficult to know whether anything you read about the war is true. You've got to cross-reference it. You've got to give it a little time. And particularly if it's breaking news, be very, very wary of breaking news. If you noticed yesterday when I talked about the bombing of the hospital, I was already wary of it. I didn't have yet real information. It was just dribbling out. But there was enough there to be suspect. Why would Israel blow up this particular hospital? They had warned another hospital that they might attack it, but not this one. They weren't operating in that region. And how did they know there were 500 people killed? Did it just happen? There were a lot of question marks on it. You've got to question everything that you read about war. Everything that you read about war. All right, so yeah, you know, the media, unsurprising to you, unsurprising to me, is biased, but it's also just wrong, and being wrong in war is par for the course. It's not surprising at all that you're wrong in a war. It's a question of what do you do afterwards, and how many of the headlines declared that they were wrong. And the reality is that right now there are riots all over the Middle East, all over the Muslim world, even in the U.S., about the bombing of the hospital because people took it seriously. People believed it all. And if the media realizes that it's spreading something that it clearly is wrong, it is their responsibility then to correct it, and correct it within the same big headlines and the same drama then they released the information to begin with. All right, finally, I want to talk a little bit more about universities. I mean, it is, we're really, I think the American people are really discovering, maybe to some extent for the first time, because this is such a visceral issue and it's such a blatant and obvious issue, they're discovering how bad the administrations and many of the professors at America's top universities really are, whether it's Columbia University, Harvard University, where the administration has chosen explicitly to tolerate student organizations and student protests that are clearly coming out in favor of Hamas, that are clearly supporting the terrorism, the horrific murders, the massacre, the rape, the destruction, the slaughtering of babies, of children, the kidnapping of people that Hamas engaged in. And the university administration is, at best, coming out with lukewarm condemnation of it, and then making the same kind of moral equivalence argument as the kind of the big L libertarians have done, and many on the left are doing, and allowing, there are no repercussions to these students. These students are calling for murder. These students are saying murder is okay. Now, they've got free speech rights, but that does not mean you can say anything at a university. University is private. It's in a sense private property, and the university has a right to say, you're not welcome here anymore. If you hold these views, we don't want you. Imagine if the KKK had a demonstration at Columbia University advocating for the reinstitution of Jim Crow laws or of slavery. Imagine if that happened at Columbia. How long would the students who participated in that kind of demonstration, how long would they remain students at Columbia, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania? 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute? Maybe half an hour it would take them to kick them out of school? Suspend them? It would be done like this. I mean, we've seen cases where, I don't know, students say something racist, or a team, a sports team, says something racist or uses a racist slur or uses racist symbolism, and the university administration goes apoplectic, and those students are penalized, and they are, you know, and I think justifiably penalized. I'm not against the universities doing that. I think that's right. They should do it. And yet, celebrating the murder of young children, celebrating the rape of women, and the administration says nothing? There's no penalty? There's no issue? There's no problem? Blaming Israel for the animalistic behavior of Hamas? Animalistic behavior that they documented and put up on Telegram and on Twitter themselves? I mean, is there anything more disgusting than that? Than murder, rape, torture? And to have students at your university go out there and celebrate this and declare support for this, that should be grounds for immediate dismissal from the university. And the very fact that they're not doing that puts Jewish students, Israeli students, students who just support Israel, at real danger. These people are advocating for violence. They're advocating for murder. How do we know that they're not going to instigate it themselves if they think it's such a wonderful idea? I don't know if you saw that professor literally saying he was exhilarated by what he saw from Hamas. Exhilarated by murder and torture and rape. These are animals. These are nihilistic animals, and the idea that a professor would say that and not suffer any consequence. Again, imagine that professor making a racist comment, a homophobic comment, a comment against trans. How long would they be at the university? And yet, to celebrate the killing of Israelis, to celebrate the killing of Jews, that's fine. No problem. No problem. You can do that on American universities, and you suffer no consequences. No consequences. And if you don't believe me, the professor is saying this, you can find their videos on YouTube, because YouTube might take my videos offline because I say something they don't like about COVID, me, right, about COVID. But they have no problem putting up online and keeping online anti-Semitic propaganda, the vilest comments and the vilest videos that celebrate violence. Go figure the community standards of the Twitter and all these other networks. It's just an unbelievable mess. Unbelievable mess. And hypocrisy and bias and, you know, but what about Israel? Yeah, I mean, that's what you hear from them. The good news, there is good news, and we'll end on the good news. The good news is the donors are waking up. Harvard has lost 2 major donors, including the Wexler family. Wexler family is kind of it's a little embarrassing. I mean, isn't the Wexler family the family that basically was involved with Epstein and the pedophile? And I mean, Wexler gave, I think, Epstein his initial in the financial world, and gave him a lot of money, and who knows what kind of involvement he had in some of the other activities that Epstein was involved in. But anyway, Wexler Foundation is withdrawing all their funding from Harvard. An Israeli billionaire is withdrawing his support for Harvard University. I just heard that somebody who I know personally, and I'm really happy to hear this, Cliff Asness of AQR is withdrawing his support from the University of Pennsylvania. I heard I heard Mark Rowan, who's also somebody I know, of Apollo Private Equity. Is it Apollo? Anyway, big private equity firm is also withdrawing his support from the University of Pennsylvania. So a lot of donors are stepping forward and acting and doing what's necessary. I've always said one way to deal with the corruption, intellectual, philosophical, moral corruption on American universities is to withdraw support, to withdraw the funding. If every businessman in America stopped supporting his enemies, i.e. the university would starve. So it's great. It's great. It's great to see. It's great to see this happening, and it's good for Cliff, good for Mark, good for the rest of them, and keep it up. We need more and more and more American successful businessmen who are on boards, who are giving money to, even if it's just a business school, it doesn't matter. Withdraw your support from universities that do not take an unequivocal, clear stand. Unequivocal, clear stand about these issues. All right. About Israel in this case. This is the issue at hand. All right. Because it's such a clear case of barbarism versus civilization, right? I mean, Hamas is clearly barbarism. I mean, I'm accusing it's my people, my tribe, as if I wasn't saying the same thing about Ukraine, as if I didn't say the same thing about 9/11 when America was attacked, as if I don't have a history of 20-something years of commenting on current events. Suddenly, I'm really pissed off because it's my tribe and my people. No, it's because barbarians attacking civilization, and that is the case. No matter what happens, that was the case after the terrorist attacks in London in 2006. That is the case over and over and over and over again. And I'm always on the side of civilization. And, I'm always on the side of civilization needs to pick up the sword and cut off the head of this. That means it needs to destroy Iran and it needs to destroy every single Islamic totalitarian organization and regime out there in the world. And I've been arguing that since before 9/11, but certainly since 9/11. So to say, oh no, Iran's just upset because it's his people, is such bullshit. I mean, it really pisses me off. People, because I'm being attacked daily on Twitter, this is collectivism, because people don't understand what collectivism is. They don't understand what individualism is. They think because you're an individualist, you don't believe in governments. I've supported declaring war on Islamic totalitarianism and banning Islamic immigration. But all I'm saying is you can't ban immigration until you declare war, until you know who the enemy is, who you're banning, who you're stopping, and why you're doing it. I've been arguing against the wimps in the West, in the UK, in Germany, in Europe, in the US, against them not being willing to declare war. I don't think immigration is all good if it's from an enemy state, but you have to declare the enemy first. But if you're not willing to declare the enemy, you have no right to stop immigrants. Declare an enemy, which I have supported, go to war with it, which I have supported, defeat it, which I have supported, and of course then you close the border off of the enemy. Part of my criticism of Trump's ban on Muslim immigration is that it was an absurd, ridiculous ban because it banned Muslim countries that were irrelevant And it didn't ban immigration from Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, where 14 of the 19 terrorists of 9/11 came from. So it was just a political theater and had no reality, because you people on the so-called right don't want to confront reality. All you want is theater. All you want is pretense. All you want is pretend. All you want is to play games. You don't want to actually engage and identify the problem and actually go out and deal with it. All you want is to put up walls. Well, look at the wall Israel put up between Gaza and Israel. How much did that help them? Screw walls. I don't believe in walls. I've never believed in walls. If the enemy's there, go over there and destroy them. Don't build a wall. A wall is a sign of weakness. A wall is a sign that you can't deal with the issue. A wall is a sign that you have no self-confidence, you have no self-esteem, you have no self-assurance, and you're not willing to go and deal with the threat that you face. So there is no wall that will protect you if you're a coward. And those of you who advocate for walls are cowards. Those of you who advocate for limiting immigration rather than taking on the enemy and destroying him are cowards. And you hide behind, oh, I care against terrorism. But really what you want is not to have people who don't look like you come into your countries. That's all. And you should go sometime to Israel and see how many people in Israel look like you. It's one of the most diverse countries in the world. All right. Sorry. Got a little angry there. All right. Let's see. Yeah, it's past midnight over here. Yeah, Scott is at the top of his game as usual with his nonsense. Let's see. Yeah, let's go to the questions. We got a lot of questions. Thank you guys. You're coming through again. We've got Tom from the UK with 100 British pounds. Thank you, Tom. Very grateful for all your work, Yaron. Greetings from London. How do we get rid of the people openly celebrating terror on our streets? Do you think that the public opinion is shifting? What's the best solution, assuming better political leadership? Look, the best solution would be, as I just indicated, the best solution would be, and it's been all along, to declare war on Islamic totalitarianism, to declare the support of Hamas as aiding and abetting the enemy, and using that to kick them out or to imprison them. You cannot aid and abet an enemy during war. So if you had proper leadership, the West would rally today together and say, we had a job after 9/11, we didn't complete it, it's time to complete it. We're going to war against Islamic totalitarianism. This happens to be the same war Israel is engaged in. We'll let Israel deal with Hamas and Hezbollah, but we are going to help the United States deal with Iran and deal with whatever other remnants there are of ISIS or whatever in the rest of the Middle East. We will go out there, we will support militarily destroying these elements, not building democracies, not bringing a new era to the Middle East, just destroying the elements that threaten the West. And those of you in the West, you Muslims in the West, to the extent that you support Hamas, Hezbollah, and you put out a list of organizations, you are hereby declared as aiding and abetting the enemies, our enemies, and expect either criminal prosecution or shipping out of the country. You're gone. That's it. So this is not hard stuff. But again, you have to make the really tough calls. And what so many people on the right are doing is they don't want to make the tough calls. They want, because they don't really care. They don't really are really fighting for self-defense. What they're really about is xenophobia. What they're really about is anti-immigration. They're not, they're not after defending the West from its real enemies. If they were, then the answer's easy. The answer's not that hard. But you have to define it. Who is the threat? Exactly. Not vaguely, not terrorism like George Bush, not Muslims like, I don't know, Donald Trump. But who is exactly the threat? Who is exactly the enemy? Yeah, Bash Bannigan says, didn't Peikoff say this long ago? Yes! He said this right after 9/11. And he said it over and over and over again. And I have not disagreed with him on this. Even at the end of our debate on immigration, he said, Yaron, would you support a ban on Muslim immigration? I said, yes. in the context, I would add, in the context of taking this seriously. Otherwise, it's a joke. Otherwise, it's a joke. Take it seriously. We're at war. The West is at war. The West has been at war from before 9/11, but certainly since 9/11. And look, all of this stuff, you can make fun of me, you can ridicule me, you can claim I don't know what Scott is lately claiming I'm doing, but I've been right on this for 20-something years. I've got a record. You can go watch my 2003 talk on the Palestinians. You can watch my talk on morality of war. You can talk my talk of 1 year after 9/11, why I thought the West was failing. I have said these things consistently for 20-something years. None of this is new. And, people have suddenly discovered that I have these opinions about killing innocents. I said that in 2002, 3. I put it in writing. It's on the web. Go read Just War Theory versus America. And, tooting my own horn here, but what the hell? Who else has the frigging courage, other than the Iron Institute, and maybe one or two other scholars out there, really, other than, the Iron Institute, me and Ankar and Elon and Alex Epstein, who wrote the article with me, and maybe one or two other non-objectivist intellectuals, who has the courage to actually say what we say about fighting wars, about what it's going to take to win, about the moral responsibility for the killing of innocents and who it lays with? Nobody out there has the courage to say this. And instead of showing a little bit of appreciation for the fact that there are people out there like me who've been public, who've stood in front of large audiences, who've gone in front of protesters and said these things, instead of showing some appreciation for that, I get the snarky, stupid, undermining commentary from a bunch of people on the chat, Scott and his buddies on the chat. That's the appreciation they have, for what we're trying to do in this fight for Western civilization. Oh, but you don't form a coalition with the wacky libertarians. If only you cooperated with the Libertarian Party, life would be so much better on Earth. God help us from our so-called friends. All right, James. Is anti-colonialism nothing but anti-Western nihilism? The left is training young people that all levels of violence in resisting a colonial power is justified. They have to prevent savages from being civilized at any cost. Yes, I mean it is. It's fundamentally anti-Western nihilism. It is a different way, it's a new terminology for undermining everything that is the West. It's a new way of undermining Western civilization, but it's basically motivated by nihilism. There is nothing out there. There's nothing, they don't offer a positive solution. They don't offer anything positive. Anti-colonialism is a more sophisticated multiculturalism. It is, instead of saying all cultures are equal, it's saying what they always meant, which is the colonial powers, i.e. Western civilization, is inferior, is worse, should pay a price, should be penalized, should be punished forever for its crimes. And they apply colonialism to Israel, which is stupid. I went through that argument on one of the shows last week, I think, about what, that it's meaningless to call Israel colonialization. Why? Because Jews have always lived there, so how are they a foreign element? Originally, if you go back far enough, if you want to go back far enough, it belongs to the land, they belong to Jews. But they bought the land, they settled the land, they built a civilization. Again, I value production, I value building, I value the creation. And that is what is important, and that is what makes civilization. That's what makes a valuable political entity. And Israel is a valuable political entity because it's free and because it's created civilization in a place that didn't have it. So yes, anti-colonialism is one of those. It's wrapped up together. I'm reading Yasha Monk's identitarian book on identitarianism, which is very interesting. And anti-colonialism has developed side by side with critical race theory and with intersectionality and all these other theories, all aimed at undermining whatever's left of capitalism, undermining Western civilization, undermining political liberalism, i.e. political freedom, undermining the very foundations of Western civilization, and ultimately all with the goal of egalitarianism. And there is no, as Leonard Peikoff shows in his dim hypothesis, there is no more evil and more destructive and more nihilistic an ideology than egalitarianism. And anti-colonialism is driven by this nihilistic egalitarian view. And it's anti-UK and it's anti-West. It's anti-West because the West was successful, and therefore the West explored the world, and therefore the West, quote, colonized the world. And they ignore completely the benefits of colonialization, the upside of colonialization. And yeah, there were horrible things that they did as colonizers, but that's all they focus on. That's all that's interesting to them. That's all that matters to them. Because the savages of whatever place it was 300 years ago are exactly the same status as the civilized because of multiculturalism, because all cultures are the same. And now colonial cultures are less, because that's what equity means. Equity means you have to penalize the strong and successful so that you can elevate the weak, right? All right. By the way, I apologize. I did not mean to suggest that people don't appreciate my work. They do. I mean, look at all the contributions I'm getting. Look at all the super chat. You know, you guys are very generous with monthly contributions and everything. So it's just that people like Scott are so focused on their petty, truly petty conflicts, and then other people who just have no understanding what individualism mean, have no understanding what tribalism mean, or who have no knowledge of who can't think, or who can't integrate across time, or don't know of all the work I've done in the past. Once in a while that just gets to me, and it really does piss me off. And since they're active on the chat, it just reminds me, and it ticks me off. I know some of you are listening to this in the podcast and hate it when I respond to the chat. I keep getting emails from people saying, stop responding to the chat. Yes, Scott, it's petty. You are a petty person. You are a petty person with one single-minded petty idea who does not stop with and you distort the truth. You are dishonest, and yeah, everything I say about you during these chats is true. A lot of people would like me to stop. Maybe I will one day. I kind of enjoy, All right, Dave says, once the victim begins to fight back in a way that shows self-esteem with the intention to end the violence permanently, the world starts to constrain and tighten the noose around their neck because they're afraid of what that looks like. Yes, they're afraid of it. And it forces them to confront this ultimate question between self-interest and altruism, between good and evil. And it also forces them to confront their own weakness. To confront the very fact that they're not doing what they should be doing. It prevents them from having to confront the evil that is out there and the fact that they won't make a moral judgment. So the good, the mediocre, the middle of the road, the compromises, the wishy-washy are always going to be offended, are always going to be threatened by the man of self-esteem. And that's exactly what you're seeing here, and you'll see it even more in the weeks to come, assuming Israel even does something. Glenn asked, have you seen the movie Golda? Interested in your take on it if you've seen it. I have seen it. I actually did a show on it. So if you look, Yaron Brook on my show on the YouTube or on the podcast app, if you do Yaron Brook Golda, I think you'll see it'll come up because it was in the title of the show. But generally, I thought it was a good movie. I thought Helen Mirren did a really good job as Golda. I thought it was super interesting. Of course, it was particularly interesting to me because that is a war that I experienced firsthand as a child. I mean, as a teenager, early teens, and it's a war my father was in. It's a war a lot of people I knew were in. So it was a war that I feel close to, in a sense, experienced. So I was really interested in how they portrayed it, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought, to a large extent, true to what actually happened. A few things I think were not exactly accurate, but generally true, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting. Z400 Razor says, knocking Scott around a bit has become a tradition on the show, really. Yeah, I guess it has, and maybe we'll keep the tradition going as long as Scott is there to be knocked around. Tony says, I go back to UNT Dallas College of Law, and they switched to online classes today because of a protest about to take place in front of my school. Related, I was also called a genocide supporter by classmates for supporting Israel. This is in Dallas College of Law. Yeah, it really is amazing and pretty horrific that this is the state of American campuses. But this shouldn't surprise any, because this is the state of the left. This is the state of the left, and this is who they are and what they are. And you know, just to kind of piss off Scott, this is also the state of what you've seen of the right. Look at how many people on the right have turned on Ben Shapiro because Ben Shapiro is so pro-Israel. Look at how much bad, awful stuff he's getting. Look at how many people have turned on Gad Saad. You know, Gad, Canadian, I've interviewed him on my show years ago. Good guy, Lebanese Jew. And I'd say typically people who follow Gad Saad are on the right, not on the left. And God, how they've turned against him. How they've turned against him. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at Vivek. This infection, this anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli, unwillingness to take moral stands, unwillingness to declare evil for what it is, unwillingness to acknowledge self-defense for what it is not just the disease of the left, sadly. It's primarily on the left, and it has its most exuberant supporters on the left, and it's had, the left has generally dominated universities, so in the universities that's what dominant. But you got to really look carefully at the right and at libertarians. Look at the moral equivocation that the libertarians are doing. Look at what the libertarians are saying about Israel. Look at how they deal with the Middle East and what they think about the U.S. and what they think about Israel in the context of this war. And if you think we can ally with people like Tucker Carlson, if you can think we can ally with people who are attacking Ben Shapiro, we can ally with the libertarians, then you're delusional. You're worse than delusional, because you'll undermine everything that this movement around Ayn Rand's ideas is trying to do in the world and trying to uphold in the world. You will undermine it, you'll destroy it, you'll undercut it. It's not, just because you hate the left doesn't mean you turn a blind eye to the evil of the right when it's there. When it's there. Shrug says, how often are there real, actual atrocities committed by the IDF? I'm not talking about legitimate targets, but just gratuitous killing of children for no reason. It's stuff the left seems to believe happens a lot. Almost never. It's very, very rare. The Israeli military is under strict rules of engagement. The worst that Israel is accused of doing, you could argue, but I don't think that even is clear, that during the Lebanon war they turned a blind eye to Christian atrocities against Muslims in Sabra and Shatila, the refugee camps in Sabra and Shatila in 1982, when Christians went in, and after the Islamists killed the Christian president, elected president of Lebanon, Bashar Gemayel, I think was his name, Bashar Gemayel. It's funny how names come to me from long time ago, far away, long time ago. But names from yesterday, I can't remember. Anyway, I think he was murdered, and then the Christians went into Sabah Jatila and slaughtered a lot of Palestinians, and then Israel was blamed for not stopping them. And I don't think Israel knew that they were going to do that, and yes, they didn't stop them. That's the worst. You know, the accidents happen, and civilians get killed, sure. The children sometimes get caught in the crossfire, sure. Did a bomb accidentally drop on a beach in Gaza during one of the Gaza wars and kill kids? Sure. None of those were purposefully done. None of those were atrocities. All of those were accidents, and all of them were the fault of the people who initiated force, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Bashir Gemayel, thank you, Bashir Gemayel. Let me just remember. So I'm trying to think of other occasions. Now, during the War of Independence, there was at least one or two massacres where Jews do kill gratuitously Palestinians. So it does happen. It hasn't happened in modern Israeli history. It just doesn't. And when soldiers do, and there have been occasions where I remember a soldier was attacked, but then when he'd subdued the Palestinian and then killed him anyway, they go to jail. Again, there are rules. There are the rules of engagement that are very strict. They're as strict as the American rules of engagement, or maybe not as strict, but close to. And soldiers are prosecuted when they act on them. Now, Jewish settlers in the West Bank have gone on rampages where they've killed people, burnt houses and stuff like that. And I have to say, and this is an embarrassment, and that the Israeli state has not prosecuted those people to the full extent of the law like they should. So Israel's not blameless, and Israel's not perfect. But the IDF itself, almost zero. Really, almost zero. And I'm not whitewashing anything here. Having served there, it's much more frequent that Israel does things that result in friendly, Israeli troops killing each other, an Israeli pilot bombing his own tanks, things like that. That's more common than Israelis gratuitously killing civilians. Vadim, do you think people in America who support moral equivalence about right and wrong are the ones who have never been bullied as children and therefore have no conception of how to stand up for what's right? I don't know. Maybe they were bullied as children but never stood up to the bully. Maybe they just accepted the bully. Hey, he has his values, I have mine. So be it. I don't know. It's very hard to provide psychological explanations for why people hold this. I think it has much more to do with moral relativism, moral subjectivism. This is certainly true of libertarians. I mean, who are we to judge other people? And with a false notion of what individualism means. And anarchy drives a lot of their thinking, right? So, and you even see some objectivists think this, right? We live in a mixed economy. We live in a place where the state commits injustices all the time. How do we know who the good guys and the bad guys are? I mean, how do we know if Jeff Bezos made his billions justifiably? Would he have made the billions in a capitalist system? We live in a mixed economy, so we can't really hail Jeff Bezos because he's a product of a mixed economy. So we don't know. Maybe it's all his money was printed by the Fed, and so the same thing happens. We live in a mixed economy, so nothing our government can do is right. How do we know? Maybe it is the military-industrial complex motivating everything that they do. Maybe they're egging them on for war. Maybe that's what's really driving things in the world. So I think it's much more the moral subjectivism and the hatred of the state and government, and not just in its manifestation today, but in principle. I think it's much more that is motivating them, and in that sense, they're really confused. They really don't see who the good guys, who the bad guys are. God, Israel's, as I said when I made fun of Dave Smith, and people called me on it, right? Israel taxes people. Israel violates individual rights. So Israel's no not a perfect country, as if anybody claimed it was. Therefore, how do we know? Maybe they're just as bad as the Palestinians. We don't know. I think it comes from that subjectivism, moral relativism, epistemological relativism, but really ultimately driven by a hatred of the state, and a hatred of the state that manifests itself primarily as hatred for good states. They don't hate bad states anywhere near as much. In that sense, there's certain nihilism there. You saw the nihilism, by the way, just since I'm stream of consciousness here. You saw the nihilism during the meme. You remember the stock memes? When the stock meme and libertarians came out and said, yeah, let's crush Wall Street. Let's destroy those hedge funds. Let's drive them into bankruptcy. Why? Since when do hedge funds and Wall Street become the bad guys? Oh, no, they're part of the establishment. They're part of the state. They're part of this world. We need to crush them. We need to destroy them. You really saw the naked nihilism among libertarians when that meme phenomenon, what was it, January of 2021, I think it was, that really came out. Okay. What am I looking for? Let's see, Liam says, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming the victim, but how could people let themselves become hostages? If you have a gun or even a kitchen knife, you have to do something, especially when your kids are in the house. I think they didn't have guns. It turns out they didn't have guns because the state of Israel had disarmed them, or had placed the guns all under the lock of key in another building, in a settlement, in the village, and they couldn't get to it. We don't know that they didn't try with knives. But when you have a gun put to your head, you do what you're told. And, I watch a lot of action movies. I'm sure you do watch a lot of action movies. And where, the heroes can easily take the gun away from the bad guy or take the knife away from the bad guy. And I just watched a movie about Afghanistan. And the good guys, the Americans, they killed probably 500 Afghans to every one American soldiers that died. And, that's great. But in reality, that doesn't work that way. In reality, it's very hard to disarm somebody who has a gun pointed at you. In reality, it's very hard to use a knife on somebody when they've got a gun pointed at you. And we don't know how much they fought, how much they didn't fight. And I think we have to be very careful in judging people until we're in that circumstance. But I think we have a false, I think generally Americans, people generally in the world, because of movies and video games, have a false sense of what violence is like. A false sense of security, a false sense, oh yeah, I would just slap him, I would just kick him, I would just do this, I would just do that. Versus what fear actually does to you, and versus just the physicality, the fact that we're not that fit, we're not that strong, we're not that flexible. I mean, how many of us have really trained in this? Now, some people are trained, but you have to be trained. I mean, somebody attacked me with a knife or a gun, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I'd like to believe I'd fight them, but I'd probably die pretty quickly because I'm not a fighter. I don't know how to fight. Never taken a fighting class in my life. Don't tell anybody because everybody thinks I know Krav Maga. I like the fact that everybody assumes I know Krav Maga. That is good. But it's a very difficult thing to do, and it's very difficult to put yourself in that circumstances and know how you would behave. But those who had guns defended themselves. And indeed, some people drove in from far away to save people out there. Yeah, I didn't say this before, but just to give you a personal sense of the tragedy here. I just learned this today. I don't know why my family didn't tell me this earlier. I guess I haven't talked to them that much since all of this has happened. But it turns out my sister's son was going to go to the festival where all those young people were killed. And he was going to go with a bunch of friends. And he didn't go for some reason, but the friends did go. One of them is missing and probably is held hostage in Gaza. That's his best friend. Two of his other friends were killed at the festival. So, I'm a little removed from Israel. I don't talk to my family that often. I probably should talk to them more right now, given what's going on. But nobody in Israel, no family in Israel, has not been touched by this. The same story happened to my wife's brother's daughter's friends were us at the festival. One of them got kidnapped. Israel's a tiny little country, and there literally is not a family in Israel that was not touched by the horrors of that day, and that is not going to be touched by the many deaths that are going to occur in the IDF over the months to come. So my family is in real distress. I mean, I text with my sister, and I talked to my dad today, and there's real distress there. This is not just something to just brush over. This is existential angst, and legitimate existential angst, and I really hope Israel does something about it, deals with it appropriately. Okay, Klaus says, you say evil is energized, but could it be this is evil's last hurrah before westernization and technology drive out collapsing authoritarianism of Russia and Islamic world? I just don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, they'll collapse, but I don't see what replaces them, and I don't see, Russia will kind of collapse. It's got nukes, it won't completely collapse. But I don't see the collapse because I don't see a confident, assertive West. Certainly not in the face of Islam. Maybe in the face of Russia, but even there, not too much. Don't exaggerate. Not in the face of Iran. Certainly not in the face of China. So I just don't see the westernization and technology taking over. If anything, we're seeing a slowdown in technological growth. We're seeing a slowdown in productivity growth. We're seeing real slowdowns in what really matters, maybe not in wages and in GDP, but certainly in productivity and in new technology. All right. All right. Henry. What is the best anti-Israeli, pro-Palestinian argument to an extent it can exist? How is Noam Chomsky on this issue? Oh, Noam Chomsky is vicious on this issue. He's terrible, awful. He's been anti-Israel for decades, anti-American. It usually goes together. So Noam Chomsky is awful, pretty much everything. I can't think of anything that Noam Chomsky is reasonably good at. What's the best anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian argument? There really isn't. This is the thing. It's so obvious. This is not subtle. This is not complicated. This is not really hard. Now, Israel does bad things. Israel's not consistently good. Israel's not consistently capitalist. It's not consistently in defense of individual rights. But again, that is not a pro-Palestinian argument. I really don't think there is a pro-Palestinian argument. Not if you know the facts. I really don't. So I'm happy to hear a steel manning of the Palestinian argument. Liam says, do you think people are starting to realize Iran needs to be taken out? No, not at all. Harper Campbell, are you familiar with Noam Finkelstein, the pathological anti-Israeli college professor making the rounds? Yes, he's a pathological anti-Israeli college professor who's making the rounds. He's terrible. He's awful. He's anti-Israeli. He manipulates the data. He lies about stuff. He exaggerates. He's completely driven by an ideology and presents himself as just a scientist. I'm just doing science. These are just the facts. BS. He's a postmodernist writing Israeli history with a clear anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist, and agenda that he is pushing. Whoops, friend Harper. I started he says, I started Christendom. I'm not very far in the audiobook yet, but so far it's easy to listen to and it's fascinating so far. I'm excited to learn more about the Middle East from this angle. Yeah, I found it very readable. Again, I listened to it on audiobooks and really interesting. And if you're interested in history, fabulous book. Michael, says, Elon Musk has made all the superchargers in Israel free. Cool. We'll see if he sticks to that. James, leftists across social media are reposting a meme about how this is beginning of decolonization. Lynch mobs of unthinking zombies. Unbelievable. Yes. And it's not, because one thing I can tell you is it's not going to be decolonizing. I mean, it could be that Israel kicks the can down the road again into the future, but it's not that Israel is going to disappear, in spite of what the left would wish. And by the way, Israel disappearing means millions and millions of people dead under the Holocaust. That's what these people are wishing for. That's what these people are advocating for. They're advocating for 7 to 8 million Israelis, 7 to 8 million Jews slaughtered. We saw what Hamas did. Would they stop if they could keep going? No. They would kill every single Jew there. And non-Jews as well, anybody who worked with the Israelis. Whoops. Michael says, Plato's philosophy is masterful at generating inversions. In a sane world, sociopaths like the heads of Hamas would be in jail. Instead, they're running the place. Yes, absolutely. Oops. Dave, I mean, it's more than just Plato, right? It's religion. Don't forget religion. Religion is not all Platonic. It's religion. Dave says, these terrorist organizations know exactly how to exploit the timidity in the face of extreme violence. Is Israel the only country in the world not allowed to win a war? Well, America's not allowed to win a war. America hasn't won a war since, I don't know, first Gulf War, and it hasn't won really a war since the Second World War. So no Western army is allowed to win. This is the West. This is a curse on the West. This is the altruism of the West. This is Christianity defanging the West. Or Christian ethics defanging the West. People have pointed out to me that Christians have won wars, yes. But that's because they didn't take their morality that seriously. And people take that morality much more seriously today. It's still their morality. Liam says, I heard Israeli soldiers by Gaza are starting to lose morale because the invasion orders haven't been given yet. What the hell are they waiting for? I don't know. For Biden to leave and Sunak to leave and who knows, and for Bibi Netanyahu to grow balls. That's what they're waiting for him to grow a spine, to grow a backbone, to have the courage to actually do what is necessary. Michael, the initiator of force does not get to choose how the recipient of force responds. Absolutely. Henry, why do intelligent people even donate to universities? Seems like the stupidest idea. Yes, but they're guilted into it. They think they're helping the world. They think university is a good place. It's motivated by a benevolence, but just a benevolence that is not warranted given the state of universities today. Grant says, don't forget to like the show. Thanks, guys. Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Grant. Absolutely. Don't forget to like the show. We've got 167 people watching live right now. 83, how many likes do we have? 99 likes. We should be way over 100. So please consider liking the show. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't really change anything. But it does help the algorithm. It does promote the show. It does get more people watching the show. The more you interact with the show, like, share, comment, chat, super chat, anything like that, increases the probability this will be shared and put out there by YouTube itself. Thank you, Grant. Colin says, I'm stunned by how reality has presented itself these past couple of weeks. It's almost enough to make you go on strike. Thank you for your work. It's more important than ever. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Michael says, did Israel really think deterrence and containment would be successful long-term strategies for these animals? I don't know if they thought it, right, thinking, but I think they hoped. I think they pretended. I think they evaded. I think they convinced themselves. They didn't do the thinking necessary to really understand that it was impossible. Ed says, with the rise of protests against Israel across the world, is it too late for the ground offensive Netanyahu had in mind originally? You know, it's never too late, because he could tell the world to go shove it. But does it become more difficult every day he waits? Yes. Does it become more difficult politically in terms of the world? Yes. And we'll see whether he does it. We're still waiting, right? As I predicted. I hate to say it. You know, all my pessimistic predictions so far coming true. All right, finally, Henry says, what do you make of big names in the CRT movement like Ta Nehisi Coates also being anti-Israel? Well, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. They're wrapped up in this, you know, a critical race theory with intersectionality, which would place the Palestinians as virtuous because they're suffering a lot. It's combined with anti-colonialism. It's combined in this whole narrative that the left has created that is aimed at diminishing the West and elevating all non-Western, you know, from their perspective, oppressed minorities. Or even if they're not minorities, majorities, but people who are colonized or oppressed at some point in history. So it's all consistent. It's all part of one thing. And again, I recommend this book by Yasha Monk on identitarianism. He makes the case that they're all linked. They're all coming from the same intellectual tradition. They all come out of postmodernism. And they're all basically organized around the same principles. I'll do a book review. I really need to be more focused on the book than on everything else going on in the world, but because it is a lot of dense content there. But it covers CRT, intersectionality, post-colonialism, woke, the whole woke phenomena, and how those are all interrelated, how they go back to specific intellectuals. And there are a few books like that. There's also a book by Chris Rufo, who does something similar, but of course Chris is from the right, and Yasha Monk is from the center left. And anyway, so there's a deep dive going on into the intellectual tradition, intellectual origin of the whole set of theories that are all connected that is under woke. And it doesn't surprise me at all that that CRT, which is a postmodernist movement, and that is based fundamentally on a rejection of the superiority of Western civilization and its fundamental goodness, and also of universality, that is, of universal values. This is, by the way, why they don't judge Islam for being anti-gay, right? So the fact that Hamas likes to kill gays doesn't bother them because, oh, it's their culture, right? So you can have gays for Hamas, you can have queers for Hamas, even though Hamas would kill them, literally, because they can segregate this, and one goes through kind of how intellectually what kind of work they do to segment and separate these things. But it's all one movement, so not surprised at all. All right, guys, thank you. We met our enhanced financial target. I really appreciate that. As you know, I'm traveling, so my show's spotty. I will try to do as many as I can over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be in Tbilisi the next 3 days. I'm doing events in Tbilisi, Georgia. Tomorrow I've got 3 events. On Saturday I've got 2 events. I'll try to do another show tomorrow, Saturday, and even Sunday. Maybe Sunday when I'm in Amsterdam, I'll try to do a show from there. But yeah, that'll be, in terms of times, I'm not committing to any particular time. Right now, just to give you a sense, it is 1 a.m. Tbilisi time, and I'm going to sleep because I have got a talk first thing tomorrow morning on the morality of capitalism to a bunch of bankers, Georgian bankers. So do you know there's a bank in Georgia? I've said this before, I don't know if you remember. There's a bank in Georgia called Golda and Taggart. Golda and Taggart. It's an investment bank. It's owned by the largest commercial bank in Georgia, Golda and Taggart. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. The founder and CEO who named it is a big Ayn Rand fan. Fan, not an objectivist, but fan. I had dinner with him once. Very cool. All right, everybody. I will see you all probably tomorrow. Thanks for the support. Really, really appreciate all the super chatters. Really, really appreciate all the people in the chat supporting me. Really, really appreciate the emails you guys are sending, and just general statements of support are greatly appreciated. They help me get through these tough days. They're tough for all of us. They're certainly tough for anybody who has any connection to Israel and family in Israel, but they're tough for anybody who values Western civilization right now. This is difficult, but thank you guys. Thanks for helping me at least get through this. See you soon.